Hi everyone, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're tuned into Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries from all around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the many new books on order or are being introduced into the libraries in the coming weeks. So you can get in quick and place a reservation on them if you'd like. And I'll also talk about some of the services that are on offer at the library. Now, Our Library has been broadcast to you today on Arrow 92.7 FM, your community access radio channel, and Wairarapa TV on Freeview Channel 41. This program is broadcast live on the third Friday of each month at 3:30 and repeated on the fourth Friday again at 3:30. So let's get started. So first up, a word from our sponsors. From the Wairarapa Library Service, those are the South Wairarapa libraries, the four libraries, Greytown, Carterton, Featherston and Martinborough. First up, the new cards are in. Beautiful new library cards adorned with a photo of the Tararurs. But it's more than just a pretty new picture. These cards will link you into the smart library system, which I'll be talking about later on, allowing you to order books from Marston, Kabadipora, and so on. There's I think there's about 30-odd libraries now, 30 libraries, I think, in that system, and allowing you delivery to your home branch free of charge. Nice and handy. All new members will automatically receive the new cards, while current members can keep their old ID cards and upgrade at their convenience. So drop by at any branch, sign up today. There's a new website in commensurate with that and a brand new catalogue. The website wls.org.nz. Click Browse Library Catalogue and jump right in. You can search just our collections or the whole smart system. So it's a fantastic new improvements that they're making there at the Wairarapa Library Service down south, Wairarapa. Upcoming events at the Wairarapa Library Service in South Wairarapa. The new evening book club kicks off its first meeting on Wednesday the 3rd of November from 7 to 8 p.m. with a discussion on Irish literary phenomenon Sally Rooney's latest novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I like Sally Rooney. She's one of my favourite Irish writers. I've read a couple of her books. Really nice writer. We'll be meeting online. Join us from the comfort of your own home. To sign up for a library copy of Rooney's novel and to receive the meeting Zoom link, email dan@wls.org.nz or drop by your local branch. That sounds like fun. And also the How to Write a Memory. It's a class introducing the craft of memoir writing. We'll have its first class on the 19th to 20th of October from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Same class, 2 sessions. A second class will meet the following week, 26th, 27th of October. They'll read short excerpts from the library shelves and learn how to commit our own memories to the page. All sessions meet online. To get the readings and a meeting link, email Dan again, dan@wls.org.nz, or drop by your local branch. So each of the libraries in Wairarapa have a presence on Facebook, so you can check out a wide variety of programs that they all have on offer by going onto the Facebook page and checking out there. There's always something interesting and very different. Libraries are open at level 2, but it's the usual masks and social distancing, and time spent in the library is limited to 30 minutes. From October 12, no more overdue charges at Wairarapa libraries. That's a big thing. They've been talking about that for a while, so that's really nice. You're not going to be charged for overdue items anymore. That's really good. Also from October 12, as we said before, all libraries in Wairarapa are now on the smart library system. Make your local library your home location and your smart items will be delivered there. To do this, visit your local library to make the change. Also, JP Services, Justice of the Peace Services, are back at your local library. They've been out for a while because of COVID, but they're back now apparently, which is nice, should you need a JP. Marston Library, the Steam Lego Challenge Portrait. Go to their Facebook page at Marston Library, post a pic of your Lego portrait to be in the draw to win a $10 warehouse voucher. And finally, I guess, don't be afraid to quiz your librarians. If there's anything you need, they're very, very approachable, they're very helpful, very friendly, not your classic library types that we grew up with, where we weren't allowed to make a noise, and that's all changed. So they're just lovely people. If you need any help at all, go along. Anything you're looking for, they can help you with. They're great. And so there's always something new at your library. Keep on checking the Facebook or their websites to see what's coming up, and you'll be surprised. There's so much going on. All right, so let's get down to the real purpose of this, which is to give you an idea of some of the material coming into the library in the coming months. So first up, as I do every month, is to go through some of the fiction, and then later on we'll talk about some of the non-fiction, and I'll also talk about some of the books that I've been reading that you might find interesting. First up is An Impossible Promise. This is by Jude Devereux. Liam O'Connor has one purpose in this life: to push the woman he loves into the arms of another man. The Irish rogue unknowingly changed the course of destiny when he fell in love with Cora MacLeod over a century ago. Their passion was intense, brief and tragic, and the angels have been trying to restore the balance of fate ever since. Now police officers in Providence Falls, North Carolina, Liam and Cora are partners on a murder investigation. The intensity of the case has drawn them closer together, but the angels have made it clear Cora must be with Finley Walsh. Cora makes her own decisions, and she's starting to have feelings for Liam. The only thing he has ever really wanted, and the only thing he is supposed to avoid. You get the idea? It's angels and a different style of fiction, but very popular nonetheless. Jude Devereux, the author of An Impossible Promise, born 1947, so quite young, in Louisville, Kentucky. She's an American author of historical romances. She's written over 40 novels, many of which have been on the New York Times bestseller list, including such titles as A Knight in Shining Armour and Remembrance. And she's sold over 50 million copies as of 2016. A very popular writer of that particular genre, Jude Devereux, and that was An Impossible Promise. Next is The Last Days of Dom Sebastian by Greg Barron. Australian archaeologist Francis da Costa and his Portuguese counterpart, Nicole Massane, follow a trail of relics and myth to a Kimberley Valley. Together they unravel the story of a medieval king, a gentle priest, a love story, and a voyage past the edge of the known world. So that's a bit different. The Last Days of Dom Sebastian by Greg Barron. Greg Barron's passionate interests include crime, terrorism, history, international politics, and the wide open spaces of outback Australia. Interesting chap. He studied international terrorism at Scotland's prestigious St Andrews University and has visited 5 of the world's 7 continents, once canoed down a flooded tropical river, and crossed Arnhem Land on foot. As I say, interesting chap. The Last Days of Dom Sebastian by Greg Barron. Next is The Lincoln Highway, and this is by, and I hope I pronounce this right, it's by Amor Towles, Amortowles, Amor Towles. The best-selling author of A Gentleman in Moscow and Rules of Civility and master of absorbing, sophisticated fiction returns with a stylish and propulsive novel set in 1950s America in June 1954. 18-year-old Emmett Watson is driven home to Nebraska by the warden of the juvenile work farm where he has just served 15 months for involuntary manslaughter. His mother, long gone, his father recently deceased, and the family farm foreclosed upon by the bank, Emmett's intention is to pick up his 8-year-old brother Billy and head to California, where they can start their lives anew. But when the warden drives away, Emmett discovers that 2 friends from the work farm have hidden themselves in the trunk of the warden's car. Together they've hatched an altogether different plan for Emmett's future, one that will take them all on a fateful journey in the opposite direction to the city of New York. That's The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. Now, Amor Towles is a 56-year-old, born in Boston, American I assume, educated at Yale and Stanford, very prestigious American colleges. He's the author of New York Times bestsellers Rules of Civility and A Gentleman in Moscow, which you might have heard of. Those 2 novels have collectively sold more than 4 million copies and have been translated into more than 30 languages. I think by that description of the gentleman that he's quite an accomplished author. The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles, I imagine it will be quite popular. Next up is Second Chance Christmas by Laurie Wilde. Joel and Jana work together. They are good friends and they are in a case of mistaken identity. They are setting up the nativity scene at their local church and find a young baby in the cradle of the manger. A note says that the mother will pick up her baby on New Year's Day. Joel and Jana are neither one married. They don't really know what to do with the baby. It becomes a pleasant ordeal for them to get the proper suppliers to be able to take care of the child themselves. Now, this is book 12 in the series, but each book apparently is standalone, can be read on its own. Second Chance Christmas by Laurie Wilde. Now, Laurie, I hope I can pronounce this one, Laurie Blalak Van Zura is a 63-year-old American author of contemporary romance novels, first under the pseudonym Laura Anthony and now as Laurie Wilde. Born in Texas, trained as a nurse, but after several attempts to write fiction, is now a full-time, very successful author. So that's Second Chance Christmas by Laurie Wilde. It's interesting to me, I hope you find it interesting too, the paths that these authors take. Very few of them actually start in life to become authors. They normally have some other way that they start life and then all of a sudden switch to something completely different, like this, a nurse to a very well-known author. It's interesting, isn't it? To me, anyway. Anyway, so if you've just tuned in and wonder what's happening, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're listening to Our Library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the many new books being introduced into the library in the coming months, in the libraries in the coming months. Now, I've just gone over 4 new fiction. I'll just go over some more. And please remember, this is just a smattering of the fiction being introduced into the libraries. Certainly with the extended libraries, all the libraries in Wairarapa, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of books that come in each month, all brand new. A lot of them requested by you. I request a lot of books myself, so the request the libraries buy certain books, and they do. They're usually pretty good. So this is just a real cross-section of a lot of the books that are coming in. This one is called An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed, and we all know that. This is by Helene Thurston. Just when things have finally cooled down for 88-year-old Maud after this disturbing discovery of a dead body in her apartment in Gothenburg, a couple of detectives return to her doorstep, ruining a perfectly good afternoon. though Maud deftly dodges their questions with the skill of an Olympic gymnast a fifth of her age. She wonders if suspicion has fallen on her, little old lady that she is. The truth is, ever since Maud was a girl, death has seemed to follow her in these 6 interlocking stories. Memories of unfortunate incidents from Maud's past keep bubbling to the surface, each triggered by something around her, an image, a word even, a taste. Meanwhile, certain problems in the present require immediate attention. Luckily, Maud is no stranger to taking matters into her own hands, even if it means she has to get a little blood on them in the process. So that sounds like a lot of fun. This is An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed by Helene Thurston. Now, Helene Thurston is a 67-year-old Swedish writer of crime fiction. The main character in her stories is Detective Inspector Irene Huss. Before becoming an author, Helene Thurston worked as a nurse. Another nurse. It's interesting, isn't it? And then as a dentist, but was forced to leave due to illness. During her illness, she worked as a translator of medical articles. 4 movies are based on some of her novels. So it's really interesting, the emergence of the Scandinavian authors, and this is no exception. This is Helene Thurston, and her novel is An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed. So interesting. Yeah, that'll be fun. Next is Best in Snow. Sort of a play on words, really. Best in Snow by David Rosenfeld. In this Christmas mystery, lawyer Andy Carpenter and his golden retriever, Tara, are on the beat after a body turns up in the snow and a journalist is the prime suspect. Christmas has come early to the town of Paterson, New Jersey, in the form of a snowstorm that dumps 2 feet of snow on the ground. Lawyer Andy Carpenter likes snow, white Christmas and all that, but it can cause problems for the walks he takes his dogs on every day. When Andy's golden retriever, Tara, goes to play in the snow and instead discovers a body, Andy ends up on the phone with the local newspaper editor. The murder victim is Mayor Alex Oliver, who had an infamous relationship with the newspaper. Last year, a young reporter published an expose, and Oliver had him fired for libel. Now, the young reporter and prime suspect is in need of a lawyer. Andy agrees to take the case, though it's not looking good this holiday season. It's another doggy book. I love doggy books. There's a lot of authors that write books like that. W. Bruce Cameron and a few others. This is Best in Snow by David Rosenfeld. Now, David Rosenfeld is a 72-year-old author born in New Jersey who's written 33 novels and 3 TV movies. The main character in most of his mystery books is Andy Carpenter, attorney and dog lover. Rosenfeld left the corporate industry and wrote screenplays for movies and television. See, again, he was in the corporate world and then, I think I'll write screenplays. So he wrote screenplays for movies and television. He turned to writing novels and has become quite successful in that genre. In 1995, he and his wife started the Tara Foundation, which has saved almost 4,000 dogs. He's a dog lover and supports more than 24 dogs. Must be a nice man. That's Best in Snow by David Rosenfeld. Another one of the doggy genre. A lot of fun. Then we've got When Silence Kills. This is by Mark Griffin. When the mutilated body of a woman is discovered, DCI Bishop is called in to oversee the case. The killing bears a striking resemblance to 3 other murders years before, but the cases were never solved. Bishop knows they need the help of Holly Wakefield, a criminal psychologist who specializes in getting inside the minds of serial killers. And Mark Griffin, author of When Silence Kills, began his writing career when he was a teenager with 3 successive years of gold medal awards in the Hampshire Writing Festival. In 1996 he moved to Los Angeles, where he turned his attention to acting, screenwriting and script writing and development. After returning to England, Mark continued in this profession and in April 2017 was shortlisted in the top 5 out of 3,500 entrants in a national crime thriller writing competition sponsored by Random House Publishing and the Daily Mail for his debut When Darkness Calls. Now, When Darkness Calls is the first book in his crime thriller series starring criminal psychologist Holly Wakefield and D.I. Bishop of the Met Police. So this is another in that series, When Silence Kills by Mark Griffin. Next is Tenderness. This is by Alison MacLeod. It's 1930 and D.H. Lawrence, exiled from his native England, is dying. As the Mediterranean glitters beneath his window, he drifts in and out of visions of the past. He relives the early years of his marriage when, in an English countryside, taut with the threat of war, his desperation drove him to commit a terrible betrayal. And there is another place and time, more like a dream than a memory, of a woman on an Italian balcony, her chestnut hair red with summer. 1959. Jacqueline Kennedy and her husband have already been marked out for greatness. Passing through New York, she slips into a hearing where a book, not a man, is brought to trial. In Cambridge University Library, the moon bright outside, a young woman and a young man meet amid the stacks and make love in the restricted section. Their different stories loop and entangle until a jury enters a court, and the world looks on as the trial unfolds. On both sides of the Atlantic, society asks, and continues to ask, is it obscenity or is it tenderness? There you go. D.H. Lawrence, author of Lady Chatterley's Lover, all that good stuff, part of the Bloomsbury group many, many years ago. Weaving that story. It sounds a very complicated story, but interesting plot lines. It could be quite an interesting book to read. Alison MacLeod, the author of Tenderness, is a 56-year-old Canadian-British writer. She's mostly noted for her 2013 novel Unexploded, which was a long-listed nominee for the 2013 Man Booker Prize. She is Canadian, born in Montreal, Quebec, of Nova Scotian parents, raised in Montreal and Halifax. She's lived in Brighton, England since 1987, studied English literature at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, and then completed her Masters in Creative Writing and a PhD at the University of Lancaster. She's published by Bloomsbury and Penguin Canada and is a professor of contemporary fiction at the University of Chichester. So again, another fascinating lady, fascinating background. And what an interesting novel. So that's Tenderness by Alison MacLeod. Alrighty, well at this point I think I'll take a short music break. When we come back I'll be letting you about some of the non-fiction being introduced into Wairarapa libraries in the coming months. So this is Alison Moyet with Falling, track 1 from her album Essex.
Float
welcome back, or if you've just tuned in, my name is Steve Lillyston and you're tuned in to our library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries all around Wairarapa, to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library in the coming months. And I'll also be talking about some of the services on offer and some of the new programs that they've got at those libraries. Earlier on, I introduced you to some of the new fiction coming into the libraries. And now we'll look at some of the non-fiction. And you've got to remember, wherever you are in Wairarapa, now through the smart library system, you can access any of this material, wherever it is in the smart library system. About 30 libraries around the Greater Wellington area. Next up is, so this is non-fiction now, we're looking at Culture Warlords. This is by Talia Levin. One reporter takes an immersive dive into white supremacy's explosive online presence, exploring the undercurrents of propaganda, racism, misogyny and history that led us to where we are now. Talia Levin is every skinhead's worst nightmare, a loud and unapologetic Jewish woman, acerbic, smart and profoundly anti-racist, with the investigative chops to expose the tactics and ideologies of online hate mongers. Culture Warlords is a story of how Levin, a frequent target of extremist trolls, including those at Fox News, dove into a Byzantine online culture of hate and learned the intricacies of how white supremacy proliferates online. Within these pages, she reveals the extremists hiding in plain sight online. White nationalists, white supremacists, National Socialists, Proud Boys, Christian extremists. In order to showcase them in their natural habitat, Talia assumes a range of identities, going undercover as a blonde Nazi babe, a forlorn incel, and a violent Aryan femme fatale. Shocking, humorous, and merciless in equal measure, Culture Warlords explores some of the vilest subcultures on the web and shows us how we can fight back. So a bit on the heavy side, but I thought fascinating book. This is by Talia Levin, Culture Warlords. Unfortunately, I couldn't find, I searched and I couldn't find much about Talia Levin at all. I think she's one of those authors I find sometimes that prefers to remain hidden. But the description of the book gives you a fair idea of the formidable sort of person she is. And that, to me, just for the topic that she's writing about and the way in which she goes about writing it, getting the material, looks like the book would be a most interesting read. So that's Culture Warlords by Talia Levin. Now we've got Shackleton. This is by Ranulph Fiennes. Discover the story Ernest Shackleton's legendary Antarctic expedition through the words of the world's greatest living explorer, Sir Ranulph Fiennes, one of the only men to understand his experience firsthand. In 1915, Sir Ernest Shackleton's attempt to traverse the Antarctic, was cut short when his ship, Endurance, became trapped on ice. Throughout the long, dark Antarctic winter, Shackleton fights for his life and the lives of his men, enduring freezing temperatures, a perilous lifeboat journey through the ice-strewn sea, and a punishing march across the South Georgia glaciers to seek the one slim chance they have of rescue. No previous biographer has experienced even a tiny taste of the polar hell on earth endured by Shackleton and his men. That cannot be said of Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who has been described as our greatest living explorer. Wow. Sir Ranulph Twistleton Wykeham Fiennes, 3rd Baronet OBE, born 1944, commonly known as Sir Ranulph Fiennes, sometimes as Ralph Fiennes, is a British explorer and holder of several endurance records. He's also a writer and poet. He served in the British Army for 8 years, including a period on counter-insurgency service, while attached to the army of the Sultanate of Oman. He later undertook numerous expeditions and was the first person to visit both the North and South Poles by surface means, and the first to completely cross Antarctica on foot. In May 2009, at the age of 65, he climbed to the summit of Mount Everest. Quite a character, obviously, and sort of definitely been there, done that, and he can certainly appreciate the trials and tribulations that Shackleton would have gone through, having done a lot of that himself, which makes that a book so well researched, and he's done all the hard work, and we'll bring that to you in Shackleton, and that's by Ranulph Fiennes. How We Became Human and Why We Need to Change. This is by Tim Dean. Over thousands of years, humans have developed mechanisms to help us live together in ever larger social groups. We developed a set of moral emotions such as empathy, guilt, and outrage, as well as a tendency to favour people in our in-groups and a propensity to punish perceived wrongdoers. Our culture also evolved, giving us powerful tools like religion and politics that could expand community sizes and maintain moral order. While these mechanisms served our ancestors well, though, our evolved sense of right and wrong is out of step with the modern world, according to Tim Dean. Social media can turn outrage into an addiction. Gender equality is still hampered by caveman thinking, and implicit bias turns to explicit oppression. How do we separate what's natural from what's right? How can we reshape our thinking to thrive in the modern world? Heavy questions. Tim Dean is a professor of English and director of the Humanities Institute at the University of Buffalo, New York. Dr. Tim Dean is a freelance philosopher, an award-winning writer and teacher. He has a doctorate in philosophy from the University of New South Wales on the evolution of morality, and specialises in ethics, critical thinking, the philosophy of science, and philosophy of education. He is also an experienced science writer and was the science and technology editor at The Conversation. It's a heavy subject, but it sounds as though this man has got the background to be able to write authoritatively about that. That's How We Became Human and Why We Need to Change by Tim Dean, Professor Tim Dean. The Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England, 400 to 1066, by Mark Morris. 1600 years ago, Britain left the Roman Empire and swiftly fell into ruin. Grand cities and luxurious villas were deserted and left to crumble, and civil society collapsed into chaos. Into this violent and unstable world came foreign invaders from across the sea and established themselves as its new masters. The Anglo-Saxons traces the turbulent history of these people across the next 6 centuries. It explains how their earliest rulers fought relentlessly against each other for glory and supremacy, and then were almost destroyed by the onslaught of the Vikings. It explores how they abandoned their old gods for Christianity, established hundreds of churches, and created dazzlingly intricate works of art. It charts the revival of towns and trade and the origins of a familiar landscape of shires, boroughs, and bishoprics. Drawing on a vast range of original evidence, chronicles, letters, archaeology and artefacts, renowned historian Mark Morris illuminates a period of history that is only dimly understood, separates the truth from the legend, and tells the extraordinary story of how the foundations of England were laid. So yes, that whole period after the Romans left in around about 400 AD, up to 1066, Battle of Hastings and all that good stuff. The Dark Ages right through to when the Normans invaded. Fascinating history, fascinating part of history, and Mark Morris is well qualified to write about this. Mark Morris, Dr. Mark Morris, is a 48-year-old British historian and broadcaster specialising in the Middle Ages. Educated at King's College London and Oxford University, is an expert on medieval monarchy and aristocracy and a Fellow of the Royal Historical Society. Mark has written numerous articles for History Today, BBC History Magazine, Heritage Today, and a number of books on English history. So if you've ever read anything about that period, 400 to 1066, I would almost guarantee that Mark Morris's book would open your eyes into a lot of new material. Just the types of material that he's drawn on, and his experience in that field, researched in that field, I would think that would be a really interesting book if you're interested in that period. So that's The Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England, 400 to 1066 by Mark Morris. So that's the end of our first segment of our library, during which I gave you a very brief overview of some of the material, some of the books coming into the library in the coming months. A lot of them are already there, some are still on the way. Coming into libraries in Wairarapa, so that's all of the libraries in Wairarapa. They're all connected now with the smart library system. So you can reserve a book in any of the libraries. You don't have to know where the book is. It will come from whichever library holds it and deliver it free of charge to your library where you can pick it up from. All right, so right now I think we'll have a brief music interlude, and when I come back I'll talk about some of the books that I've been reading that you may find interesting. So just be a few seconds. This is, so we've got Enya singing Caribbean Blue from her Shepherd's Moon album. if you've just tuned in, my name is Steve Lillyston, and you're tuned into our library, which is a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries all around Wairarapa, to let you know about some of the new books coming into the library in the coming months, some of which may already be there. So in the first segment of the program, I talked about some of the new fiction coming in and some of the new non-fiction. And this section now, I'd like to talk about some of the books that I've been reading, which you might find interesting, hopefully. So here we go. Now, I've had an interesting month in my reading material. I've attempted to read 7 books. The first one is The New Confessions. This is by William Boyd. And although very articulate, it just didn't resonate. It's another one of these books that if it doesn't resonate, I give it a little bit of a go, but this one, it was just, well, sorry, Mr. Boyd, but it was frankly boring, and I didn't want to finish it, so I didn't. So that's The New Confessions by William Boyd. Not very good, didn't enjoy it. I've read some of William Boyd's work before and quite enjoyed it, but this one I didn't. Next up was Billy Summers by Stephen King. Very, very popular writer, of course, Stephen King. And I was really disappointed. I've got back to reading Stephen King after a break of many, many years. I used to read him years and years ago, and I stopped reading him. And I've just started reading him again and really enjoying some of his new books. And Billy Summers is very popular. So I tried to read it, but I read about 100 pages, and I'm sorry, but it just dribbled on, and it was going nowhere to me. I got about a quarter of the way through the book, and it was going nowhere. So if it did go somewhere after that, well, I didn't get it. So first 2 books I tried to read didn't do very well, I'm afraid. Next up was At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, if that's how you pronounce it, D-I-O-P. A very harrowing read. It's a very small book, but it was the winner of the 2021 Booker Prize, so I thought it would be worth a read. David Diop is from Senegal, is a Senegalese man fighting with the French during World War One. And all about his experiences fighting for the French, and a lot of racism involved and so on. But it was also very, very horrific, really, in some ways, a lot of ways. Lots of blood and madness and people going nuts, and you would in that environment, I would. So it's not for the faint of heart, be aware, but beautifully written book and very powerful. At Night All Blood is Black. Next up I read Under the Blue. This is by Whatâ Aristide, if that's right again, Ona Aristide. Very unusual. It was a pandemic dystopian novel, which I thought was very apt for where we are at the moment. A lot of features on AI, artificial intelligence. It's about a man and 2 women who are the only ones left alive, trying to get to safety across Europe to Africa. I loved it. I thought it was really, really good. But it was a page turner. I couldn't stop reading it. It was just so good. But it came up with a number of different interesting posits, the likes of, they talked about nuclear power plants, and it's a thing I'd not even thought about. But if we had like a pandemic like we've got, but more virulent, one that wipes everybody out in seconds, the biggest threat to whoever's left would probably be nuclear power stations, which I thought was a fascinating way of looking at things. But of course, without the technology or the technically capable to run them, what would happen to them? Over time, they would melt down. and then you'd have a nuclear winter instead. So they were trying to get to Africa, where they figured they'd be safe from, certainly not Europe. Europe would be a bad place to be. Africa would be better because it's remote from these power stations, these nuclear power stations. So I thought that was fascinating, but really a neat book to read. I next read, or tried to read, The Green Road by Anne Enright, an Irish author, and I like the Irish authors, as you may know. I didn't care for that one at all. I gave up after about 6 pages. I've tried her work before with no luck, but I was pressed by a friend to try it again. But sorry, Lizzie, I tried Anne Enright again, and she just doesn't work for me. Couldn't do it. So that was another failure. So I'm not doing well at the moment. I've got 3 failures and 2 successes. Next one was The Outside Boy. This is by Janine Cummins. She also wrote American Dirt, which I just loved and I raved about to everybody. I've read some of her work before, and she's very, very good. The Outside Boy, that was a lovely book. It's a novel about gypsies in Ireland. They call them pavos or pavos in Ireland. And just a lovely, lovely book. Couldn't stop putting that one down either. I had to finish that one. The Outside Boy by Janine Cummins. And then just for a complete switcheroony, I normally read fiction, but for a complete switch, I read The Reckoning by Mary Trump. That's ex-President Donald Trump's niece, you may have heard of. She's written a few books. And while she definitely has a go at Trump, her uncle, the main purpose of the book is to talk about racism in America. Well, not just America, worldwide really, but focused on America and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and it's a really interesting book about American history and as it pertains to slavery, and a lot of that is very relevant today. Where's America going? How's it going to get out of this? Lots of food for thought. Lovely writer, Mary Trump. Very, very skilled in her writing, with a PhD in psychology, and she's quite a force. It's a lovely book, The Reckoning by Mary Trump. It's not very big. It's only about 170 pages long. Very good. And I'm currently reading Before You Knew My Name. This is by Jacqueline Bublitz. It's actually her debut novel, and I'm not sure where I saw it, but I saw it somewhere mentioned as being a good book to read. I read a review somewhere, and I thought it was worth a read. She's a Kiwi, I think. She lives between Melbourne and the West Coast. I couldn't find out a lot about her, but the interesting thing to me was that it's her debut novel, and yet it's so popular. I think there's like 86 requests to read it on reservations on this book. So I got in quite quickly, I guess, and I'm reading it first. But I'm enjoying it. It's a very interesting book, very well written, a little bit different. The style is a little bit different, takes a bit of getting used to. But it's very good. I might review that at some other stage. So that's about all I've got for this month. But just to remind you that the Wairarapa Library Service, the South Wairarapa Libraries, are now all part of the Smart Library system. So Masterton Library was part of that. Well, it still is. Masterton Library is part of the Smart Library system, but now all the other libraries in Wairarapa are all part of that same system. So you can get a book anywhere, and you can return it in any of the libraries in Wairarapa, which is quite handy. And you've got access now to, in South Wairarapa, you've got access to something like 30 libraries. If your library hasn't got it, there's a pretty good chance another library in the Greater Wellington area has it, one of these 30 libraries, from the Hut or Wairarapa, or could be anywhere. So that's the big news at the moment. And that's all I've got time for. So that's me for another month. My name's Steve Lillyston. That was Our Library. That was a 60-minute program sponsored by the lovely folk at the libraries all around Wairarapa to let you know about some of the new books coming to the library in the coming months. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. And please tune in again to our show next month, the third Friday in November, at 3:30 p.m. on Arrow 92.7 FM, your community access radio channel, and Wairarapa TV on Freeview Channel 41. So until then, happy reading. Bye-bye.